I've got Leonard Ulrich with us on air. He is the Canadian doc film producer of New World Order, Secret Societies, and Biblical Prophecy. Leonard, welcome.
Hi, great to be back with you.
It's good to talk. Just for the audience's sake, I did, I believe, a 4-part interview with Leonard for my blogtalkradio.com/Peter Hebert series of shows, and that should be broadcasting at the end of the month, or maybe in July. Leonard is coming on this evening as a special guest so that we can talk a little bit about the relationship of Israel with the New World Order, because in the interview, in the conversation that we had not too long ago, we really did not get into Israel. So Leonard, give us a quick overview on your doc film, and then let's talk about Israel.
Okay, well, in 30 seconds or less, my film, New World Order, Secret Societies, and Biblical Prophecy, deals with how evil is organized and is fulfilling biblical prophecy to the letter. And it goes all the way back 6,000 years in time through ancient mystery religions into the French Revolution and pretty well every major war from that time period up to and including 9/11 and the current war on terror.
Okay.
And then the last, 10-15% is just simply simple projections into the future, because there's too many variables in the equation. If you get any too specific, you're in danger of not getting it right.
Got it. Okay, so the most provocative thing that you shared with me in that earlier series of interviews is that evil is organized, and that challenged my worldview. Maybe I'm naive. I assume that most people are fairly good, and I hope that is the truth. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I'm willing to accept that possibility, but I think most of us think that most people are fairly good people, hardworking, responsible, honest. Am I being naive? I'm not going to be offended if you say yes.
Well, actually, I have to disagree.
Okay.
Simply because I get my information from how I interpret the Bible, which is literally, and the Bible says all our righteousness is like filthy rags. So
okay.
there's not much you can do with a filthy rag. So it's only when we operate on Christian principles, as in imitate Jesus, that we're actually doing something good.
Got it. All right, so I think we talked about Adam Weishaupt, May 1st, 1776, 1789, the French Revolution, all these guys that are getting their paintings or photographs with their one hand hidden in their jacket, the hidden hand. So let's fast forward and talk about Israel. How does Israel factor into the New World Order? I see Israel as just a tiny little nation. It's the ancient homeland of the Jewish people, and they've had a fairly rough go at it, and a fairly unique history when you compare their lives with the lives of, say, the Japanese or the folks of Greece or England. I mean, no other people have been continually kicked out from every country they've ever been in, and then resettle their ancient homeland. So talk to us about Israel. How does Israel fit into all this?
Okay, well, to understand Israel, we have to understand Zionism and the Rothschilds. And very quickly, political Zionism is the social movement which creates and sustains the physical nation of Israel.
Okay.
And that definition is in the present tense because the territory of Israel is changing. I think we all see that in the news.
Okay.
And political Zionism is also the driver for world government through Israel in the tradition of the heretical Frankist Jews.
Slow down.
Yeah.
What did you just say? Something about Zionism is the driving force for the New World Order? Is that what you said?
Yes. political Zionism is the driver for world government through Israel in the tradition of the heretical Frankist Jews. And I'm not tarring and feathering all of Judaism. I have Jewish friends, some of whom are experts in the New World Order, and they teach me things about the Jewish side of the New World Order, in quotation marks, just as there is a Christian side of the New World Order, in quotation marks.
Okay, got it. Well, I mean, you've made a statement, and respectfully, I'm going to ask you, if you could, to prove it.
Absolutely.
Or to support it, at least to support the statement.
Okay. We have to go back to 1666 in Europe, when a guy by the name of Shabbatai Tzvi came around at the scene in Jewish circles, and he said the Messiah is going to come back in 1666, and that obviously didn't pan out.
Okay.
Then Shabbatai Tzvi started to say that he was the Messiah, and he also said that this world only has a finite amount of sin in it, and that in order to hasten the appearance of God, which was Shabbataya in his altered state, if you catch my drift, that sin should be practiced and promoted wherever possible. This is a wild idea. But
yes, it's completely contrary to common sense or any religious values, really.
That's right. And when Shabbatai Tzvi and Jakob Frank, his later disciple, when Jakob Frank visited Frankfurt, he met up with good old Mayor Amschel Rothschild,
okay,
who gave him some money to assist in the French Revolution. So now we've got all these dots are starting to connect. And the Rothschilds, of course, did not, contrary to popular belief, create the Illuminati, nor did they fund the French Revolution. They were a simple banking operation which really gathered prominence by financing members of the Illuminati.
Okay.
So the Illuminati were a perfect storm of three separate but related forces, which is Frankism, the Rothschilds, and basically Adam Weishaupt and his coterie of revolutionary thinkers.
Okay.
Now, of course, we need to know, how does this connect with the Rothschilds? Well, the Rothschilds have a Jewish background. And I use that phrase Jewish background in quotation marks because that's debatable. Many Jews today, religious Jews, want nothing to do with the Rothschilds. Unfortunately, they still dominate the financial structure of the world because they created it.
Okay. Leading financial innovators.
Absolutely.
Okay.
What happened was that they financed both sides of the War of 1812.
Okay.
And they took control of England and the stock exchange by putting out the false rumor that Napoleon won the war.
Right.
And then the stock market tanked, and the Rothschilds bought up the London Stock Exchange for 2 or 3 cents on the dollar. They literally owned England at that point.
Okay. Now, but how does that fit into Israel in, say, 48 and forward?
Okay. The Rothschilds eventually, because they have a Jewish background, they have a soft spot for the recreation of the ancient Israelite homeland in what was Palestine.
In their defense, that's understandable.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Anything can be twisted or used to your advantage. You can start off with good intentions.
Right.
And then you can eventually get sidetracked.
Okay.
And in the case of the Rothschilds, they never had good intentions. I'll say that.
All right.
Okay, so along came a guy named Theodor Herzl in the late 1800s who solidified the desire for the state of Israel by writing a book called The Jewish State.
Right.
And the Rothschilds funded or created the Zionist Federation of Great Britain in 1897 to promote political Zionism with Theodor Herzl as president.
Okay.
Okay, so now you have the political force, the political desire to create Israel about 50 years before 1948. So no one can say, oh, Israel was created out of nothing overnight.
No, of course not. There was careful planning and patience. You know, anybody who has studied Zionism in the state of Israel, I have, for example, at the college level, you know, we understand that this happened by careful planning and patience, seeding of settlements and kibbutzes, and reclaiming the land. But how does the New World Order side of this fit in?
Okay, the Rothschilds are not religious Jews. Their God, literally, by their own fruits, we shall judge them. Their God is mammon, or money. And if you study the definition of the word mammon, it refers to a demon which is obsessed with gold coins.
You're kidding.
I'm not.
You know, the funny thing about, not the funny thing, but the interesting thing about the Bible, you know, it doesn't matter if you're a believer or a non-believer. If you approach the Bible, whether it's the Hebrew Bible or the New Testament, invariably you're going to be looking at two other issues in order to understand what you're reading. One of them is linguistics or language, and the other one is history for the context. And so, you know, that's one of these funny phrases that Jesus makes. You cannot serve God and mammon. It's got to be one or the other.
That's right.
So you're saying that mammon is a non-Jewish God?
It's certainly not Judeo-Christian.
Okay.
It's opposed to Judeo-Christian values.
Okay, so it doesn't just mean money.
No, absolutely not. It's more occult than financial.
Okay.
But money is just a means to the end, and the end is control, which is what we're going to get to here.
Okay.
Okay, so long story short, we've just identified the fact that the Rothschilds funded and created political Zionism about 50 years before Israel ever was declared by the UN Declaration.
Right.
And, sad to say, the Rothschilds needed, according to the Hegelian dialectic, a good reason to carve out the state of Israel in the middle of the Muslim world. And that good reason was the Holocaust, which was funded by the Rothschilds.
All right.
And encouraged by the Rothschilds.
All right. Now, that's probably the most controversial thing you've said all night. The Rothschilds funded and did what with the Holocaust?
They basically, you have to read Edwin Black's The Transfer Agreement and IBM and the Holocaust.
Yeah.
And then you'll quickly get the historical foundation of the fact that political Zionism, headed up by the Rothschilds, was actively involved in helping Hitler to foment the Holocaust against the Jews.
Okay.
In other words, the political Zionism was more than willing to hurt Judaism in order to justify the creation of Israel.
So, somewhere in the scriptures, one of the prophets says, first, God is speaking through the prophet, one of the prophets, first I'm going to send fishermen to come and try to fish you back, and if you don't respond to that, I'm going to send the wolves, and they're going to chase you out so that you'll come back to the land.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it sounds like, what you're describing.
Well, the funny thing is, and I want to reemphasize this point throughout the interview because the time is ticking away, I often marvel that no matter how dark my studies of the New World Order get, I'm always buoyed or enlightened by the fact that that which is opposed to God has no choice but to fulfill Bible prophecy.
All right, well, somewhere it states that Israel will become the head of the nations. Right now, the United States is probably the lead nation on planet Earth. China, I think in its mind, thinks it is or would like to be. The former Soviet Union, same thing. So, I mean, is that what you mean by Israel's role in the New World Order, to become the lead nation among all the nations?
Absolutely. We've just been going through a whirlwind historical tour to understand that point which you just made. Israel will become the chief concern at some point in the near future.
Now, when you say a chief concern, are you talking about controversy over rebuilding the temple, or the Muslims and Arabs upset with an enlarged Israel, or the occupied West Bank, or war crimes in Gaza? What do you mean?
Yes, yes, and yes. How about that?
Okay.
Yes, the Muslim world will be enraged at some point at the reconstruction of the Jewish temple. And yes, the Muslim world and the international community will be enraged at the expansion of Israel's territory beyond its current borders. And specifically, if you go all the way back to Genesis 15,
right,
18 to 21, it says that Greater Israel is defined as from the river of Egypt, which is not the Nile, but is a tiny northeastern corner of Egypt,
okay,
all the way to the Euphrates.
Okay.
And that's pretty well, the vast majority of the Middle East.
Well, if that were to happen in our lifetime, Israel would have three major waterfronts: the Mediterranean, the Persian Gulf, I believe, and what's that body of water that comes up to the Suez?
The Strait of Hormuz, or?
Well, it's that body of water that separates Saudi Arabia from Egypt and Ethiopia.
I know what you're referring to, but
it sounds like what you're describing is if there is a greater Israel, which I have a feeling it's going to happen. I don't know how, I don't know when, and I'm sure there are mixed feelings. One is, on the one side, yeah, God is fulfilling His prophecies, and we're seeing it happen, and then the other side is, oh my God, we're on the eve of a nuclear war.
Absolutely.
I could see that if Israel took the land out to the Euphrates, it would become a oil-rich nation overnight. And if that happened, that would be the reason, I think, for the Gog and Magog scenario from Ezekiel 37 and 38, where the hooks are put into the jaws of Gog and Magog to come and take a spoil.
And I'm glad that you arrived at that point halfway during this interview, because that's exactly where I wanted to be.
Because that is the ultimate spoil or plunder. It's the wealth, that's the resource, which is oil.
And water.
Okay.
And so what we've just done, Peter, is go through, the connections between the Illuminati and the Rothschilds, and we've defined Zionism, and we've gone through its role in the Holocaust and the creation of Israel in 1948.
Right.
And then we've also gone through how, according to the Bible, how I read it at least, how Israel will expand its borders.
Okay.
And get a load of this. Specifically in Ezekiel 38, it says, "You will say," in other words, to Israel's enemies, "I will invade a land of unwalled villages.
Right.
I will attack a peaceful and unsuspecting people, all of them living without walls and without gates and bars."
Right.
Now, that is not, I repeat, not the Israel today, especially when you consider the fact that there are several times more miles of walls than ever existed in the Berlin Wall.
Got it. So what needs to happen next is a global, Ronald Reagan with a global presence. This wall must come down.
Yes, somehow Israel must increase its confidence and territory, because it doesn't have either now, to the point where it is so confident that it doesn't have to have those walls. Now, I can't imagine that scenario with Palestine being there.
Is Israel in the wrong?
Oh, that's a loaded question.
I hate to ask such a yes-no simplistic question. I mean, I've always viewed Israel, the Jewish people, as having a rightful claim to their ancient homeland. The objection I have is the manner in which it was done. You know, 2/3 of the Palestinian Arabs fled for their lives, and they can't return. And to me, that's morally wrong.
Yes. One of the many aspects of deception in all this is to put out the myth that, there was nothing in Palestine before Israel was created.
Right.
That's lie number one.
Yeah, that's Joan Peters and I think pieces of Mark Twain.
Yes.
Right. Samuel Clemens.
Right. Samuel Longhorn Clemens. That's right. And so someone is going to get displaced in all this, and more people are going to get displaced in all this. And, ultimately, you have to go back to the Bible if you are a Christian. I don't appreciate how Israel is ignoring all kinds of conventions by bombing parts of Palestine with white phosphorus. It's disgusting.
We agree on that. So how is it possible that the modern-day Jews, as I understand it, are the offspring of Judah, Benjamin, and Aaron and Levi? Because you'll meet a ton of guys with the last name Levin or Cohen, and Jew means from the tribe of Judah, and I believe Benjamin was the other southern tribe which survived. The 10 northern tribes disappeared into the genetic gene pool of, I guess, Europe.
Yes, but here's the rub.
Okay.
This will really distance me from many of your Jewish listeners.
All right.
But I can take that.
That's all right.
From a Christian point of view, a Jew is one who is circumcised in his or her heart.
Well, that's the New Testament. That sounds like Paul.
Right.
That sounds like
right.
Paul. Okay.
So every single author of the entire Bible was a Jew. Every single disciple was a Jew. Jesus was a Jew. So we have to count on the biblical definition of what a Jew is.
Right.
Now that means, by logical extension, that those who do not accept the Messiah as the perfect sacrifice, the fulfillment of the law, are just as far away from Jesus as the radical Palestinian or Muslim terrorists.
Wow.
And there is the controversial point.
Clarify that.
Okay. Jeremiah says that Israel will be a cup of trembling to the nations.
Right.
And if you think it's bad now, it's only going to get worse.
I agree with you without having to need all the details. You can only see that it's getting worse. I'm holding a copy of Rock Creek Free Press. A guy named Webster Tarpley, he's on Russia Today all the time. He lives about 5 miles down the street from me. Headline states, U.S.-Pakistan near open war. Chinese ultimatum warns Washington against attack. China has officially put the United States on notice that Washington's planned attack on Pakistan will be interpreted as an act of aggression against Beijing. Holy moly.
That's right. And the basic outline of what I understand the Bible and its description of Israel's changing territory is this. Israel will expand its territory. To what degree is an unknown to me at this point.
And it'll probably be viewed as provocative?
Well,
they'll say that it's defensive for security reasons, right?
Oh, now, Peter, you've hit on the prime point, which is this.
Okay.
Zionism
right.
has operated on the Judeo-Christian world just as Nazism operated on the German world.
All right, clarify that.
Okay. Nazism was a external or contrived political force that co-opted Germany's identity and ambitions.
Okay.
Okay, and the same thing can be said of Zionism today.
In the modern world.
That's correct.
All right.
Okay, different setting, different time, same process.
Wow.
The Rothschilds and political Zionism is busy pounding the Holocaust into the Judeo-Christian mindset when, in fact, about 10 times as many Chinese died in the so-called Great Revolution than Jews ever died in the concentration camps, even though, both actions are disgusting.
Right.
But how much of that fact or of that ratio do you ever hear in the mainstream media today?
No, I hear you. My awakening to the issue of the Holocaust was through Norm Finkelstein in his doc film. I don't recall the title to it, but I think the argument that he makes is that the overemphasis on the Holocaust trivializes the genocides against other peoples.
That's quite correct. And here's how it relates to Israel's territory.
Okay.
Political Zionism has created the mindset in the Judeo-Christian world that the only good defense that Israel has is offense.
Our God is a mighty God. He reigns from heaven above.
Yes, and our missiles can do the same thing.
Yes, the weapons of his indignation. Okay.
Yes, remember, the Rothschilds and political Zionism, long story short, political Zionism has gone from faith in God to faith in the law to faith in themselves.
Okay.
Okay, they worship their own works. They revel in their own ability to manipulate the world situation. They have no faith whatsoever in God. And right now in Israel, there are at least 200, if not 400 nuclear missiles.
Okay.
And that's pretty scary.
There's a belief among most Christians, I think, that there will be a beast and a false prophet, or the Antichrist and the false prophet. One rises from the sea, which is a metaphor for being a non-Jew. One rises from the land, which is another way of saying that he will be a Jew. What do you see happening?
Oh, I'm so glad you segued into that point. Remember, Judaism in general,
right?
In general, I'm just using general terms, I'm not tarring and feathering at all of Judaism,
right,
has rejected Jesus as a Messiah. So they are still looking for their Messiah to come as a general political and religious figure.
All right, but let's slow down. Are you? Is it possible that you could be overstating that fact or that point? Because I would be more inclined to think that only the really religious or Orthodox Jews are looking for a Messiah. I mean, I have a friend, a Jewish friend, but his last name happens to be Frank. And I don't see the guy looking for the Messiah.
You are quite correct in correcting me on that view, in sharpening that focus.
Okay.
Yes, I would say religious Jews. You're quite right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whenever I run into Jews or guys that are Israeli, I feel a warmth in my heart. I feel an affection like I am meeting a cousin or a half-brother. And, I mean, I was getting a pretzel and a lemonade over the weekend. Guy's last name is Yaffe. And I said, "You're Israeli, aren't you?" He says, "No, we're from Baltimore." I says, "Well, you've got an Israeli name." He says, "Well, we're Jewish." I says, "I know, I could tell by the last name. It's actually Jaffa for the city." And we started talking, and it's very friendly, and I immediately felt a bond. And I know in my heart that this guy is probably not sharing my worldview, or let me rephrase that, my eschatology. You know, he probably shares much of my worldview with regard to morality, ethics. He probably believes what I believe. There's one God. I don't know if the guy is an atheist, if he's observant, if he's secular, but I felt an affection automatically. I don't know why. It's always been that way. So.
Yeah, and I would agree with your observations. And in order to cement that scripturally, you have to read Ezekiel 37, 38, 39 to get the big picture.
Okay.
And basically, Ezekiel 37, verse 14 says, I will put my spirit in you, and you will live, and I will settle you in your own land. Then you will know that I, the Lord, have spoken. In other words, God says, you know what? I'm going to set up Israel first, and then you're slowly going to start to ask, why are we here? And then when you begin to ask that question, I will make you believe in Jesus as the Messiah against Jewish tradition. And if you want an example of that, you can go to YouTube and enter in the phrase Israelis who believe in Jesus. And there is an excellent 5-minute Israeli television cast or newscast clip on that. And it's amazing to see the even confrontations between traditional religious Jews in Jerusalem,
right,
and those who have said, you know what, Jesus fulfills our traditions.
Okay.
And this is what gives me hope in all of this. In all of the doom and gloom, there is hope.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, the Antichrist and the false prophet, I mean, who's doing what? I mean, I think most of us understand or suspect that there's going to be a 7-year peace treaty. How does that work out? And why does that happen?
Okay, we've already established that Israel's going to push out in terms of its boundaries.
Okay.
And because of that, literally half the planet is going to be determined in imposing the absolute final solution once and for all.
Slow down. What did you just say?
About half the planet will be very much possessed with the idea that it needs to take care of Israel once and for all.
You mean pick up where Hitler left off?
You got it.
Got it. And that's okay. Because of Israel's
expansion.
Got it. And it's going to be viewed as a crime against humanity, theft and all that, genocide?
Exactly. I mean, when you look at the archaeological definitions of Gog and Magog and everything else, it's like all of North America going after New Jersey.
Why would God allow this to happen? Or why would the Jews or the Israelis, let me rephrase that, the political leadership within Israel be so inclined to be provocative against their neighbors?
Because they have chutzpah. They believe that their might makes them right.
Well, the scriptures, as I understand it, states that 2/3 of Israel will be cut off.
That is correct. But
yeah,
just when things get absolutely hopeless,
right,
for the state of Israel and its larger boundaries, God himself will intervene with a massive earthquake and other supernatural signs. And it is my belief, and there are others who disagree on that, and that's fine. You know, the big club, and there's different interpretations. It's my belief that this miracle about rescuing Israel will be misattributed to the Antichrist.
Okay.
So that Israel will quickly want to rebuild a temple and worship the man of sin who arrives on the scene, quite miraculously, and claims credit for what God did.
Okay.
In other words, God himself will save Israel from its own pride because he made a promise thousands of years ago.
Right.
And that miraculous act, that huge earthquake, an earthquake so massive that it'll never be repeated again, will literally swallow up millions and millions of the forces arrayed all around Israel.
It's sort of like Korah's rebellion in, what is it, Exodus?
Yes, or if you want to take a modern twist to it, kind of like what happened in Lord of the Rings at the gates of Mordor.
Okay. But the finale, as I understand it, in Revelation there are two themes, the mark of the beast or the seal of God. Who in their right mind would worship a man who is the devil as if he were God and then receive an RFID chip or whatever it is?
Well, you have to understand what Satan was before his fall. And Satan was the highest order of created archangels whose body was made out of precious stones in settings of gold, which made music as they moved. Now, I don't fully understand that, but I think that's pretty spectacular.
Yeah, there's somewhere I recall reading that there's harps or something under his wings that made the music.
That's right.
Yeah.
So now if Satan shows up in his traditional evil form, he won't get a whole lot of people to follow him. So the key here is deception. He can assume whatever form he wants to. And he's going to assume the form that makes him most attractive to humanity. And I believe that when he shows up, Christians won't be here because of the so-called rapture. And I understand that's another controversial point.
Now, are you talking about a pre-tribulation or a last hour? What are you talking about?
If you have to twist my arm, I'd say I would be a pre-tribulation follower of the rapture, yes.
Is that the first seal or the last trump?
Good question. I don't know offhand, but I do know this.
Well, the last trump takes place at the end of the last seal.
That is true.
Okay.
But my argument in support of the rapture is this, and it's not even in Scripture, and that is this. The world has always wanted an existence without God. Well, it's going to get it.
I think on that last note, you're right. Be careful of what you wish for, because you might get it.
Exactly.
Yes.
But also know this. Nature abhors a vacuum.
Right.
There's no such thing as no God. There is such a thing as some God.
Okay.
Okay, in this case, the Antichrist, which also stands for in place of God.
Right.
Okay, it has a dual meaning. That one who is opposed to God and one who stands in the place of God.
Okay.
And by that time, the temple will have been fully rebuilt because Satan will achieve his greatest desire, which is to have all the people of the world worship him, and your final act as a conscious, independent human being will be to worship the Antichrist and then stand in line for your chip, and that will be the last independent human decision anyone will ever make when they receive that chip.
Now, is this the last 3.5 years, the last 5 months? What is it?
I generally hold to the last 3.5 year view, yes.
All right. Okay, so, it's a lot of hopeful stuff, a lot of chilling stuff. Some of it is right out of the headlines. What about, this idea somewhere in the scriptures that states that in that day, I think it's referring to after everything is settled down and there's a new heaven and new earth, or the millennial reign of Christ on earth. In that day, all the nations will come up to Jerusalem to worship, and those that do not come up, God will not send rain to their land. Will harp still be used?
Oh, you know what? It's actually not funny that you would ask that question. That's a brilliant question.
Thank you.
No, really, it is. That's a whole other can of worms.
Is harp technology... when I first heard about harp technology, it was from some older ministers out of Oklahoma. I'm sorry I don't remember their name. It was back in the late 80s. And I'll be candid, I thought these guys were a lunatic fringe, you know. But today, and I read their articles, and it made sense. They had the documentation, but it just sounded too far-fetched.
Well, yes, it does. But here is the funny thing, Peter.
Yeah.
And I'll sum it up in one sentence.
Sure.
Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Or miracles.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, now we all know that that HARP exists.
I think most of us recognize that today.
That's right, because in my second volume, I will get into Bill Clinton's science advisor meeting with the whole bunch of security heads, and out of his own mouth, on an official U.S. government briefing, he says, and I'm paraphrasing now, and others are playing games with the weather and are using it as a weapon. Now, this is on an official government transcript uttered by Clinton's science advisor and at a meeting with high government officials.
But let's fast forward, 50 years, 500 years, and, let's just say I'm living in the millennium, and one year I decide not to show up to Jerusalem to celebrate Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles. Is a Levite in the temple going to say, former Pete didn't show up. He's got a 500-acre tract in the mountains of Virginia. Let's not send rain his way. I mean, how's that going to work?
Well, basically, Satan and his greatest desire is to be worshipped as the God of all gods in the temple of God.
Right.
Okay, and he's going to perform all kinds of miracles, some of which are going to be technological, others are going to be supernatural, others are going to be a mix between the two. Now, Satan's ultimate goal, he believes this. It's not possible, but he believes this because faith is more powerful than fact. I can stand at the top of a tall building, and I can believe that I can fly. And that belief is going to be greater than the fact of gravity.
Okay.
Okay, so Satan is so twisted, he's so delusional, that he believes that with enough people and enough supernatural forces behind him and enough technological forces behind him, that he can stop Jesus' return to earth. He believes that.
Okay.
So he's going to be inspiring men and women and supernatural elements yet to be revealed to get involved in all kinds of technology in the vain attempt to stop Jesus' return. And that includes changing the human genome to make it unredeemable.
Twisted.
Very. It happened once before.
It happened once before, right.
Yeah, in Genesis 6. And the difference between thousands of years ago and now is technology.
Okay, got it. All right, let me ask you, I don't know if it's far-fetched, off the wall, or it's after 420. I'll ask the question. Do these demons or fallen angels or UFOs?
In a word, yes. Absolutely.
The British group, yes. Things about arriving UFOs, the Circus of Heaven, stuff that, when you look at the lyrics, you're going, what the heck are they singing about? There's one set of lyrics in Yes that talks about, it goes through numbers, 1 through 6. 1, the word will enter all their hearts. 2, the duel will alter them. And then it ends with 666. The fight to free the land. The islands of Arabia. 666.
Oh, isn't that great?
It's incredible. And, I grew up with this stuff from the 70s, and I'm wondering where are these guys getting these ideas for these lyrics?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Oh, by the way, just as another mind-blowing point, I learned about this only about 2 months ago.
What's that?
The term or number 666 has an additional layer of meaning.
Okay.
Okay. The human genome is made up of a twin-coiled double helix.
Right.
Okay. More and more biologists are beginning to consider, and especially Christian paleobiologists, are beginning to consider the growing possibility that the term 666 may refer to the triple helix of the angelic DNA that produced the Nephilim.
Now, you're speculating.
Oh, absolutely.
Got it. Okay. Well, my understanding of the first reference to 666 is somewhere in the Old Testament. King Solomon was paid 666 wedges of gold from the temple every year.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Hey, Patty, are you still there?
Yes, I'm here.
Patty, you're coming through very faint. We've got a few minutes before the break. I'm sorry that if I was dominating the Q&A. Do you have a question you want to get in for Leonard?
No, actually, I've been listening pretty intently. As far as what I do have a question about is way back to the beginning of the interview when you were talking about the Rothschilds sort of like being in the right place at the right time to become the Zionist bankers.
Right.
Well, don't you think that maybe the Rothschilds might have, because it is their way and their motive and their way of promoting their agenda to put themselves in the right place at the right time to manipulate. So do you think that instead of them just happening on, I have a difficulty believing that the Rothschilds could ever have been anything but simple bankers, and I was just wondering if maybe there was either manipulation on both sides by the powers that be at that time, the Zionists, and then the joining of the bankers as if it was two powers that came together. And it just seems always that way, that it's just a coinky-dink that the Rothschilds are a part of this foundation or invested in this corporation or whatever. And I was just wondering if maybe you thought that might be a possibility also.
Leonard, we got about 6 minutes.
Okay, from what I heard about the question, it came in very faintly. So the question was, what is the connection between the Rothschilds and the occult, perhaps?
The bankers.
Yeah, the Rothschilds and the bankers. The Rothschilds basically evolved into the largest banking institution in Europe in one generation, simply because they were the financiers to members of the Illuminati, and because they financed both sides of the War of 1812 and took control, through a giant fraud, of the London Stock Exchange, and then had enough money to refinance the rebuilding of Europe after Napoleon.
That's what I suspected. In defense of Rothschilds and these guys, I know a lot of Jewish families and people in this area, and a lot of these guys, some of them are very well-to-do because they've worked hard, they're professionals, they've also inherited money, and you can see their names in the foundation directory. And, if you've got a foundation, it means you're sitting on a lot of money. And, they may not be politically running for office, but when it comes to the issue, they're going to advocate for Israel. When it comes to somebody in the state of Israel needing help, like to do a mitzvah, to help with a cause, they're going to send money. And, I understand it, and I cannot hold that against them. And I have a feeling that's what happened back in the 1800s. Right place, right time. They had the opportunity, the ability, and they took action. And that is what propelled them to be able to launch that dream next year in Jerusalem, to be able to kickstart, an idea, rebuild the state of Israel. So I have a feeling that's what happened.
Absolutely. I mean, there are people out there who believe that if you've got a headache, you can blame the Rothschilds. On the other hand, there is an occult side to the Rothschilds, and if you want an example of that, I would encourage you to go to Google Images and type in Israeli Supreme Court building.
Okay.
And the features of the Israeli Supreme Court are so incredibly occult. You've got the pyramid with the all-seeing eye in the roof line, and you've got ley lines, and you've got the obelisks there. And I'm going, that would be a perfect spot for the Antichrist to rule over Israel.
I think most folks who are not Christians, who are listening to this, or secular Jews, their normal reaction is going to be WTF.
Well, the proof is there.
Yeah, I've seen the images, and when I first saw them, it was like, what? It's too hard to believe.
Yes, and the name Rothschild is carved in stone in 2 spots in that building, and there's a picture of Lord Rothschild with a whole bunch of prominent Jewish political leaders. I believe even Yitzhak Rabin, if I'm not mistaken, looking over a model of the building before it was constructed. Yeah,
I've seen that image somewhere on the internet. So let's forget the mystical, occultic stuff for just a moment, and just to wrap up, my interpretation of what you're sharing is European Jews created these societies, and through these different societies, whether I don't care if it's the Masons, the Illuminati, or whatever, they were able to achieve their end goal, which was to take an idea from the drawing board, the state of Israel, and to bring it into reality. Is that a fair summary?
Absolute 100% correct. You nailed it.
Okay. Well, that's where we are. Again, folks, we're talking with Leonard Ulrich, Manitoba, Canada. I saw his doc film. It's on YouTube, called The New World Order, Secret Societies, and Biblical Prophecy. I believe it's about 2 hours and a half almost. It is one of the best doc films I have seen to date. I'm anxious to see it again, and I'm encouraging all of you who are listening to this broadcast, take a look at it. It's on YouTube. NWO, Secret Societies, and Biblical Prophecy. Leonard, one last question, and we're going to call it quits. Will HARP technology be in the millennium?
It will not be required, because God himself will be active in that millennium.
Well, I hope so. Maybe I am naive and childlike or simplistic in my faith, but, I genuinely hope and believe in a good God, the Father of mankind. He created all of us, and I believe in the redemptive power of Jesus Christ and what he did for all of us. And it is my sincere hope that, even though we're going to see all this stuff go down, that somehow, some way, we're going to make it through to the end, to be counted worthy to stand before him when that day comes.
And that's my hope as well.
Amen. Leonard, thanks for being my guest. Great to talk again.
Yes, likewise.
Only the best.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.